The late afternoon sun streamed into the kitchen, catching dust motes dancing in the air. The only sound was the quiet, rhythmic hum of the dishwasher until the back door burst open. My daughter, Chloe, stood framed in the doorway, waving an envelope like a banner won in battle. Her 17-year-old face, usually open and bright, was twisted with a cruel satisfaction I'd never witnessed before. "Look what arrived today," she announced, her voice dripping with a venom that sent a chill down my spine. She strode towards me, slapping the envelope onto the granite countertop that separated us. "DNA results? Care to explain why Dad isn't listed as my biological father?" My hands, soapy from washing the last few dishes, froze over the sink. I reached deliberately for a kitchen towel, drying each finger slowly, buying myself precious seconds to anchor my racing heart. I'd always known this moment might arrive, a potential storm cloud on the horizon of our lives, but I hadn't pictured it like this, not with this look of smug triumph radiating from my own child. "How long, Mum?" Chloe demanded, crossing her arms, a barrier between us. "How long have you been lying to us? Does Dad even know? Or have you been playing him for a fool all these years too?" Taking a deep breath, I turned to face her fully, studying the features so reminiscent of my own youth, yet currently devoid of the warmth and understanding I desperately needed from her. "Sit down, Chloe," I said, my voice quieter than I expected, but firm. "This isn't a conversation to have standing." She scoffed, but complied, sinking into one of the kitchen chairs, though her posture still screamed righteous anger. "Fine. Explain. Explain how you've managed to live this life for 17 years. This ought to be good." My name is Eleanor Mitchell, and my daughter had just, with the careless force of teenage certainty, thrown open a door to a past I had spent nearly 2 decades trying to keep bolted shut, not out of shame, but because there's some truths that carry a weight too heavy for young shoulders. Some stories demand a maturity and context that only time can provide. This, I knew instinctively, wasn't the right moment. But Chloe, armed with her paper weapon, had forced my hand. I sat down opposite her, folding my hands on the cool wood of the table. "First," I began, meeting her glare, "I need you to understand something fundamental. Every choice I have ever made, everything I have done, was motivated by wanting to protect you and give you the very best life possible." Chloe rolled her eyes dramatically. "Save the mom speech, okay? I just want the truth." "The truth," I replied carefully, choosing my words like stepping stones across a rushing river, "is complicated. And before we delve any deeper, I need to know what you're really hoping to achieve with this. Are you genuinely seeking answers, Chloe, or are you just trying to lash out and hurt me?" For a fraction of a second, she faltered, her aggressive confidence flickering. "I deserve to know who my real father is," she said finally, though some of the sharp edge had dulled from her voice. I nodded slowly. "Yes, you absolutely do. But not like this. Not brandished like a weapon to try and tear this family apart." "Family?" She laughed, a short, bitter sound. "What family? It's all built on lies." "No," I countered firmly, leaning forward slightly. "It's built on love. Your father, the man who raised you, James, the man who has loved you unconditionally every single day of your life. He knows you're not biologically his. Chloe, he has always known." Her eyes widened, the carefully constructed narrative of betrayal she'd built around herself beginning to visibly crack. "What?" "James and I met when I was already pregnant with you," I explained, watching her face intently for any sign of understanding. "I was 22, terrified and completely alone. He had no obligation to stay, no reason to love a child that wasn't his by blood. But he chose to. He chose us, every single day since." "But..." Chloe's voice trembled now, the anger replaced by confusion. "But why didn't you tell me?" I reached across the table, my heart clenching with relief when she didn't pull her hand away from my touch. Because some stories need time, sweetheart. Because you needed to be old enough to grasp that family isn't just about DNA strands. It's about choice. It's about commitment. It's about showing up day after day. It's about love. Then, who is my biological father? She asked, her voice smaller now, almost hesitant. I closed my eyes for a brief moment, the memories washing over me, a tide I'd held back for so long. His name was Ethan, I said softly. And that story, that's the part I've been trying to shield you from. I want to know, Chloe insisted, the earlier smugness entirely gone, replaced by a raw vulnerability. I need to know. Steeling myself, I took another deep breath. This was the conversation I'd rehearsed in my mind countless times, always imagining it years down the line when she was older, perhaps facing difficult choices of her own, better equipped to understand the intricate tapestry of love, loss, and the decisions made in the heat of youth. I met Ethan when I was in college, I began, my voice surprisingly steady despite the familiar ache tightening my chest. He was incredibly charming, driven, ambitious, and I thought I was head over heels in love. I paused, letting the image settle. We dated for almost a year before I found out I was pregnant. Chloe leaned forward, her entire focus on me, hanging on every word. What happened? When I told him about the pregnancy, I continued, choosing my words with immense care, he made it unequivocally clear that he wasn't ready for that kind of responsibility. He had his entire future mapped out. Law school, a high-flying career, a life that had no room for an unexpected baby. He told me to take care of it. And when I refused, my voice faltered slightly. He disappeared, vanished. Just like that? Chloe whispered, her eyes wide with disbelief. I nodded, the memory still sharp. Just like that. I tried reaching out a few times, but he blocked my number, changed his email address. His parents, your biological grandparents, they contacted me once. They told me explicitly to stay away from their son, even offered me money to keep quiet about the whole situation. Did you take it? Chloe asked, her gaze searching mine. No, I said firmly, meeting her eyes. Absolutely not. I didn't want their hush money. I wanted to give you a life filled with love and honesty, not one built on secrets and shame. So I dropped out of college, moved back in with my parents, and started working 2 jobs to save money and prepare for your arrival. I watched Chloe absorb this new information, her earlier bravado having completely evaporated, leaving behind a quiet confusion. But then how did you meet Dad? I mean, James? A small, genuine smile touched my lips at the memory. I was working shifts at a coffee shop downtown. I was 7 months pregnant, constantly exhausted, and feeling pretty overwhelmed. James was a regular customer, always polite, always left a generous tip. One afternoon, I was so tired I nearly fainted while taking his order. I chuckled softly. He caught me, helped me sit down, brought me a glass of water, and insisted on staying with me until my shift was over. And he didn't care? That you were pregnant with someone else's baby? He told me later, I replied, feeling the sting of grateful tears behind my eyes. That he felt like he was getting 2 miracles for the price of 1. I saw Chloe's lip tremble. He started stopping by the coffee shop more often after that, always checking on me, sometimes bringing me healthy snacks because he'd read somewhere that pregnant women needed extra nutrients. He really chose us, she whispered. He really did, I confirmed, my voice thick with emotion. We got married when you were 6 months old. He insisted on legally adopting you right away, said he wanted the world, and especially you, to know you were his daughter in every single way that mattered. That's why his name is on your birth certificate, Chloe, because he chose to be your father. The kitchen fell silent then, the weight of the story settling between us. I could almost see the gears turning in Chloe's mind as she reconciled the angry narrative she'd walked in with against this far more complex, love-filled reality. The certainty she'd worn like armour had crumbled. I'm sorry, she finally whispered, the words choked as tears began to spill down her cheeks. Mum, I'm so sorry. I thought I was uncovering some terrible secret, some awful betrayal. I just wanted to hurt you because I've been so angry lately about everything, and I didn't even really know why. I moved swiftly around the table then, pulling her chair closer and wrapping my arms around her shaking shoulders. She leaned into me, sobbing against my chest. Oh, sweetheart, I murmured, stroking her hair. You're 17. Being angry sometimes, feeling confused is all part of growing up. But next time, please just talk to me. Ask the questions. Don't try to weaponize our history like this. She nodded against my shoulder, her tears dampening my shirt. Dad, James, is he going to be mad about the DNA test? No, I said softly, holding her tight. He's not going to be mad. He always knew this day might come eventually. We both did. We hoped you'd feel safe enough to come to us first, that we could tell you this story together when you were truly ready to hear it. I want to hear it, Chloe said, pulling back slightly, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. All of it. And I want Dad here too. A wave of relief washed over me. I smiled, reaching for my phone on the counter. Okay, I'll call him. I paused, catching her eye. But Chloe, remember this feeling. Remember how different the truth turned out to be from what you'd imagined in your head. Sometimes the stories we invent about other people's choices, they rarely capture the full picture. As I dialed James's number, I watched Chloe sink back into her chair. The DNA results lay forgotten on the countertop. She looked younger now, more vulnerable, reminiscent of the little girl who used to crawl into our bed during thunderstorms, seeking comfort. James answered on the second ring, his familiar voice a balm to my frayed nerves. Hey, Eleanor, everything okay? Chloe took a DNA test. I said simply, no preamble needed. It's time. Time for that conversation we've always known we'd have. There was a brief pause on the line, then his warm, steady voice came through, unwavering. Okay, I'll be home in 20 minutes. We'll do this together, like we've done everything else. I hung up and looked at Chloe, who was watching me with red-rimmed, anxious eyes. He's on his way, I told her gently. Are you ready to hear the whole story? She nodded, and I saw a subtle shift in her demeanour. The last vestiges of defiance had melted away, replaced by something softer, more open. Yeah, she said quietly, her voice regaining a little strength. Yeah, I think I am. True to his word, James arrived exactly 20 minutes later. His familiar footsteps echoed through the hallway, growing louder as he approached the kitchen. I saw Chloe tense almost imperceptibly at the sound, her earlier, hard-won composure seeming fragile again. When he appeared in the kitchen doorway, still in his work clothes, his gaze immediately found Chloe. Hey, sweetheart, he said softly, his voice full of warmth as he set his briefcase down by the door. Your mum filled me in. Chloe's lip trembled. Dad, But before she could stumble through an apology, James crossed the room in a few quick strides and enveloped her in a tight hug. It's okay, Chloe Bug, he murmured into her hair, using his old pet name for her. It's okay. We knew this day would come. I just wish you'd felt you could come to us first, that's all. I watched them embrace, my heart swelling with an almost painful surge of love for this incredible man who had stepped into a messy situation all those years ago and chosen us, who had never, not for 1 second, made Chloe feel like she was anything less than his entire world. When they finally pulled apart, James kept one arm securely around Chloe's shoulders as he sat down beside her at the table, creating a united front. So, he said, his gaze moving between us calm and steady. Where should we pick up? Mom told me about meeting you, Chloe said quietly, her eyes downcast for a moment before lifting to meet his. About how you chose us. Even when, James smiled, a genuine, loving smile that reached his eyes, which then met mine across the table in a silent exchange of shared history and deep affection. "Best decision I ever made," he stated simply, unequivocally. "But there's more to the story, isn't there, Eleanor?" I nodded, knowing we couldn't hold back anything now. The time for shielding her was over. She deserved the complete truth, complexities and all. "Yes, Chloe needs to know about what happened later, about Ethan, about his attempt to come back into the picture." Chloe's head snapped up, her eyes wide with surprise. "What? He tried to come back? When?" Taking another steadying breath, I felt James's solid presence beside Chloe, lending me strength. "When you were 5 years old," I began, the memory still vivid, "Ethan showed up unexpectedly at our front door. Apparently, he'd seen a recent photograph of you at his parents' house. It turned out they'd been quietly keeping tabs on us through mutual acquaintances, something I hadn't known at the time." "What did he want?" Chloe asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "He said he'd made a terrible mistake," I continued, the scene replaying in my mind. "He explained he'd finished law school, built a successful career, even gotten married, but he felt like something fundamental was missing from his life. He said he couldn't stop thinking about the daughter he'd walked away from." I saw James's jaw tighten almost imperceptibly, a flicker of old anger, but his voice remained calm when he prompted me gently. "And what did you tell him, Eleanor?" I reached across the table again, taking Chloe's hand in mine. "I told him," I said, my voice firm with the conviction I'd felt that day, "that he forfeited the right to be your father the moment he chose to walk away. I told him that being a parent isn't a role you can just pick up when it finally feels convenient. Your dad, James, he had been there for every single moment. Every scraped knee, every bedtime story, every middle-of-the-night nightmare, every small triumph. He was your father in every way that truly mattered." Did Ethan fight you on it?" Chloe asked, her knuckles white where she gripped my hand. "He threatened to take us to court," James answered, his voice level and steady, protecting Chloe even now from the full force of that past fear. "He mentioned he had resources now, lawyers, that he could easily prove paternity and demand partial custody or visitation rights." Chloe gasped, her eyes wide with alarm. "What did you do?" "We fought back," I said simply. "Or rather, we prepared to. We had years of documented abandonment, proof that he had explicitly rejected any responsibility when I was pregnant. Plus, crucially, James had legally adopted you years earlier. The law was firmly on our side. But more importantly than the law," James added, giving Chloe's shoulder a reassuring squeeze, "you were 5 years old enough to understand conflict, old enough to be deeply affected by a messy, potentially public custody battle. We were never going to put you through that kind of trauma just because Ethan suddenly decided he was ready to play dad. He backed off eventually," I continued. "I think his lawyer probably advised him how weak his case was, and perhaps he realised that pursuing it would only cause pain and disruption for everyone involved, especially for you. But he did make one request before he left." "What was it?" Chloe asked, leaning forward again. "He asked that when you were old enough, when you could truly understand," I explained, "that we tell you the truth. Tell you that he deeply regretted his choices back then, that he'd grown up, realised the magnitude of what he'd thrown away." I paused, studying my daughter's face, searching for understanding. "We agreed we would tell you, but on our terms, when we felt you were ready." Chloe was quiet for a long moment, absorbing this final piece of the puzzle. Do you know where he is now?" James and I exchanged a brief look. "Yes," I said carefully. "He's still practicing law in the area, actually. Has his own firm downtown. He remarried, has 2 other children with his wife." My half-siblings," Chloe whispered, testing the unfamiliar words on her tongue. "Biologically, yes," James said gently. "But Chloe, you need to understand something very important. Just because you share DNA with someone doesn't automatically grant them rights to your time, your energy, or your heart. That connection, if any, is entirely your choice to explore or not explore, when and if you ever feel ready. Chloe looked up at James then, fresh tears welling in her eyes, but these were different tears, not of anger or confusion, but of profound understanding and love. "But you'll always be my real dad, right? No matter what." James pulled her close again, his own eyes glistening with emotion. "Always, sweetheart," he choked out, his voice thick. "Always. Nothing could ever change that." I watched them, my own tears blurring my vision, remembering all the countless moments that had woven the fabric of our family. The day James first held baby Chloe, his eyes filled with awe and fierce protectiveness. Her first hesitant steps taken directly towards his outstretched hands, her trust absolute. The countless father-daughter dances in the living room, the silly bedtime stories he'd invent, the infinite, small, everyday moments of love and commitment that had forged their unshakable bond. "I feel so stupid," Chloe said finally, pulling back and wiping her eyes again. "I came in here thinking I was going to blow up our lives, expose this huge scandal, but instead, I finished for her, my voice soft. "You learned that family is often far more complicated and far more beautiful than simple biology. You learned that love is a choice, Chloe, a choice we make every single day. And that DNA test," James added, gesturing towards the forgotten envelope, "it doesn't change who we are to each other. It doesn't erase 17 years of history or diminish 1 ounce of the love I have for you. If anything, it just confirms what I've always known in my heart, that choosing to be your father was, and always will be, the greatest gift and privilege of my life." Chloe reached for the envelope, still sitting innocently on the counter. Her fingers trembled slightly as she picked it up. Can we throw this away now? I don't need it anymore." I smiled through my own tears, my heart full. "Of course, sweetheart." We watched as she methodically tore the envelope and the papers inside in half, then into quarters, letting the small white pieces flutter into the trash bin beneath the sink. As she did, I saw a visible shift in her expression, a tangible release of tension, replaced by a quiet kind of peace settling over her features. "Mom," she said softly, looking first at me, then at James. "Dad, I'm really, truly sorry for trying to hurt you, for not trusting you enough to just ask." "We understand," I assured her, reaching out to squeeze her hand again. "Growing up means questioning things, trying to figure out your place in the world, who you are. But please, next time you have big questions, especially about your past, come to us first, we promise. We've never wanted to hide anything from you. We only ever wanted to protect you until you were ready for the whole truth." James nodded in firm agreement beside her. "And now that everything is out in the open," he said gently, "we can talk about what you want to do next, if anything. If you eventually have questions about Ethan, about that side of your biological heritage, we will help you find those answers whenever you're ready. No pressure, no timeline but your own." Chloe shook her head, a small, decisive movement. I don't think I want to know any more right now. Maybe someday, I don't know." She looked between us, her expression softening into a genuine, heartfelt smile. "Right now, I just want to be here, with my real family." The 3 of us sat there together in the quiet kitchen as the evening light began to fade outside the windows, the earlier storm replaced by a calm harbour. Our family, tested by a secret brought violently into the light, felt stronger, truer for having weathered it together. Chloe's DNA test, intended as a weapon of accusation, had unexpectedly become a bridge to deeper understanding. A powerful reminder that the bonds that matter most aren't always the ones assigned by birth, but the ones consciously chosen, nurtured, and protected through life's inevitable storms. Later that night, long after Chloe had retreated to her room, the familiar sounds of her moving about, getting ready for bed, a precious, ordinary rhythm. James and I sat together on the back porch swing. His arm was warm and solid around my shoulders as we watched the first stars begin to prick the twilight sky. "You okay?" he asked softly, his voice a low rumble beside me. I nodded, leaning my head against his shoulder, inhaling the familiar scent of him, soap and sawdust and safety. "Better than okay, I think," I murmured. I think this needed to happen. Maybe not quite like this, not with the initial blast of anger, but she needed to know the truth. She deserved it." "She's stronger than we sometimes give her credit for," James mused, his thumb rubbing gentle circles on my arm. "Just like her mother." I turned my head slightly to look at him. This wonderful man who had not only stepped into my life when I was at my lowest, but had chosen wholeheartedly to build a family with me, to love my daughter as his own without reservation. "Thank you," I whispered, the words encompassing years of gratitude. "For everything, for loving us both so completely, so fiercely." He smiled, pulling me a little closer. "Thank you, Eleanor, for letting me, for trusting me with your heart and with Chloe's." Inside, the house was quiet now. Chloe must have settled down for the night. The silence felt comfortable, earned. "Do you think," I began quietly, voicing the question lingering in the back of my mind, "do you think she'll want to meet him someday? Ethan?" James was quiet for a moment, considering it. "Maybe," he said finally. "And if and when she does, we'll support her 100%. But I think today showed her something incredibly important, that the truth isn't always simple or what we expect it to be. And sometimes the family we choose, the family we build together, is far more powerful and real than the family we're simply born into." I nodded, feeling a profound sense of peace settle over me, deep and resonant. The secret I had carried for so long, a heavy weight disguised as protection, was finally out, and somehow its release hadn't broken us, but illuminated the truth of our foundation. Our family wasn't perfect. No family is. But it was real. It was built, deliberately, brick by brick, on choice, on unwavering love, on the conscious, daily decision to show up for each other. Chloe's DNA test, the catalyst for so much initial pain and fear, hadn't destroyed us. It had, in its own unexpected way, brought us closer, stripping away the final layer of secrecy and revealing the unshakable core beneath. It had shown Chloe and reminded us that family isn't just about blood ties. It's about the people who stay, the people who choose you again and again, the people who love you through every storm and help you build a life. One shared moment, one quiet evening, one unconditional hug at a time. As James and I sat there under the vast, indifferent beauty of the night sky, I thought about all the winding paths, the unexpected turns, the struggles and triumphs that had led us to this exact moment. And I knew with a certainty that settled deep in my bones that we had created something truly beautiful, something enduring. A family bound not merely by genetics, but by something infinitely stronger. The quiet, resilient, extraordinary power of unconditional love.